The conversation I'm having with Mo Fathelbab in this next podcast goes on a number of different levels. I talk in the podcast about going from thinking to heart. And I think it's a real conversation that forums can bring that to life. I've never been a member of a forum, whether it's YPO or YEO or EO now, but I really see the benefit from talking to people that I work with. I think in the US, the forum world has become bigger over the years, but there are many people I've connected with in the European circuit who are members of entrepreneurs organizations. And the value it brings to them is about building that trust with other members of their team, other members of their peer group, and other members of society who run other businesses. And the key to me is about breaking down those barriers. Running a business can be a lonely place. And I think a lot of CEOs, leaders, entrepreneurs, founders actually don't confront that issue. They just battle on, not thinking about their own stress and what it's doing for them, but also think about the relationships they could be building if they did connect more. So I'd urge you to listen to this conversation with Mo Fathelbab and understand what it means for you, because maybe there's a forum that you need to be connected with, which might help you ask those questions, which in turn would help you drive a better, bigger, faster business, connected back to humanity. And as we talk in the Sparks By Ignium podcast, we're all rooted in purpose. And we really want to help people run their businesses from a purpose angle, because that's the thing that will connect employees, connect you back to your source, and actually ultimately help you make more money, but be doing it the right way, knowing that you're doing good for society and good for yourself mainly, because actually it's looking after our own health, whether that's mental health, physical health, or other that we need to be aware of. And I think learning from Mo is that's what forums can do. So listen in, think about the questions you might want to ask, and ask yourself your question as well. Where are you not being vulnerable? And where might you need to open up more? Because that might be the key that unlocks your business as you move forward. Enjoy the show. And as always, let me know what you think. Let me know your questions. We're always open. We want to find out what's going on for you. And as always, if you hear of other people who could learn from this podcast, please pass on to them, because it might just be the one life that you help change in their business world. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Phil Rose. I'm the host of the Sparks By Ignium podcast. And today I am delighted to welcome a guest that I first met in Boston in late August 2024. I learned a lot about him just from his 1-hour presentation. I learned a lot about him from the things that other people said about him. And I think when you listen to what he has to say, you'll also learn a lot about him, because he's about building real relationships, about really connecting with people. So I'm delighted to learn from what Mo Fathelbab has to say to us in this conversation as we talk about real relationships and what got Mo to where he is today and where he's going with his next organization. Mo is the president of International Facilitators Organization. He's a motivational speaker, and he's a communication expert who runs peer groups. So Mo, welcome to the Sparks By Ignium podcast.
Thank you, Phil. Great to be with you.
Thank you. And this is the second time we've tried to get this together because of technology problems last time. But I think despite technology, communications in real people to people is what you're all about building real relationships. And you said something to me when we spoke once before. You said about your job is about facilitating meaningful communications for the sake of building real relationships. So I'd love to dig into that. And that's a big opening. But tell me a bit about real relationships from your perspective before we delve into your past.
Yeah. I probably couldn't answer that question as effectively when I had not been introduced to the concept of forum, which is the peer group process that I've become so enamored with. And so maybe I could even divide my life into before forum, BF, or after forum, AF.
I like that. Go for it. Tell me the beginning.
Well, the beginning is I certainly didn't know what I was doing as I was growing up. I certainly didn't always feel like I fit in. I certainly didn't know what vulnerability meant in terms of having meaningful conversation that actually connects people. And so until I went to that very first forum training event in 1990, 1991, whatever it was, until I went to that, I perhaps had a different view of what it means to be in a relationship, or maybe I hadn't even considered it deeply, because at that point I was fairly young. But at this training, we had people from all over North America, some of whom I'd met and known, and some of them I hadn't met or known. And by day one of this 2-day program, people were sharing things they had never shared, and I was one of those people. And what I found was an incredible amount of support. I found that I was much more empathetic to what I'm hearing and noticing and what people are sharing. And I felt a sense of belonging. I felt a sense of I'm okay here, irrespective of what pains I've had in my life.
So tell me, you've used this word forum, and for a number of our listeners in the UK specifically, we won't have heard of the word forum. So you and I have talked about this a bit before, but I'd love you to talk about what it started. Because back in the beginning, you were part of YEO, and I'd love to go back onto that because I've not spoken with Vern about this specifically. But just give me an indication of where forum fitted in and how you became to become part of that forum.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it goes back probably 50 years ago or so with Young Presidents Organization, and maybe more than 50 years. But when they were started, Ray Hickok, the founder, was in a place where he had inherited the family business, and he was a young president, and he didn't know everything he needed to know to run his business effectively. And so he started the Young Presidents Organization, YPO, to find other young presidents with whom he can share his challenges and his opportunities, so they could learn and grow together. So that was really the nucleus, the genesis. And then some 20 years after that organization was started, they really got serious and formalized forum, which I will define as a methodology that creates a safe environment for a small group of peers to be able to share openly and honestly what's going on in their lives so that they can truly help each other grow and overcome.
Wow.
In a supportive environment.
And interesting, isn't it, that point you made around, truly help each other, because, from what you heard about Ray right at the beginning, as a family business owner and taking over that business, there's a lot of pressure there, and having somewhere else to share that. And you said that thing about safe environment, and you and I work with lots of business owners, and I want to come on to that later on in the show. But in terms of building that safe environment where people can really talk to each other about what's going on for them, because a lot of people think, hey, you're a business owner, it must be easy for you. But there's a lot of baggage, a lot of pressure that you've got to deal with. And I think when you said that about forum, creating that safe environment, a small group of peers, there's a lot of power in that.
So much. Look, what I realized in that safe environment is that I could say things that I've only thought.
Wow.
I could hear myself say things that I've only thought.
Yeah.
And I could see how saying those things affects other people. And I could see what that means to them. And seeing that in their eyes gives me a greater understanding of what this issue means to me, hearing their experiences or how they've dealt with something similar also creates a sense of awareness and enlightenment for me.
Yeah.
But if I don't bring it up because I'm too ashamed or embarrassed, I'm never going to learn about how other people have approached or thought about this very issue that might be a challenge for me.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Over the last 10 or so years, the word vulnerability in leadership and vulnerability in business has been bandied around a lot, where people talk about that and saying that business owners need to be vulnerable, business leaders need to be vulnerable to building a life. What I'm hearing there is that actually what you were doing way back when you started this was opening yourself up as a business leader, a business owner, to really express things that you'd not talked about before. And I wonder, a lot of business owners out there listening might be thinking, yeah, why do we need to do that? We just hear about making money. And you and I have different takes on that. I know we've talked about the purpose side of business. But I wonder, how would you approach those business owners who are in their business and just here to make money, revenue up, cost down, make more money? Where does what you're talking about fit in for them?
Making money is perhaps one of the most important purposes of a business. Others would say a business serves its clients, and that's another purpose. A business serves its employees, and that is another purpose. A business serves its community, and that is another purpose. But if the business is going to thrive and succeed,
Yeah.
then I would venture to guess that you need to have employees who are happy, who feel a sense of fulfillment and a sense of belonging, and that showing up to work has a greater meaning
Yeah.
than just showing up to work.
Yeah.
And if I have friends at work, if I have confidence at work, if I have people that I trust at work, it makes my work more fulfilling,
Yeah.
more energizing. I know I'm going to have support if I need it.
Yeah.
And we've seen research from Gallup that says if people have four friends at work, profitability of the company goes up by 15%.
Wow.
So, maybe there was an old model when we started in business, you and I, Phil, 20, 30 years ago, where it maybe was just okay to focus on making money.
Yeah.
I think it's a new world. And yeah, the word vulnerability was absolutely not part of my vernacular.
Yeah.
When I first heard the concept of forum in 1991, the word vulnerability didn't even come up.
Wow.
What did come up is we're going to have a safe environment. We're going to have a non-judgmental environment so that people can speak openly and honestly and really share what's on their minds and in their hearts.
Yeah. And I love that. And you've said a whole load of things there which really resonate. This podcast is all about purpose in terms of building purpose into business. And a lot of people think, hey, we can't build purpose. That's light and fluffy. And it's to us, it's about purpose and prosperity, purpose and profit, it's that and conversation. And the bits you said there is, when we can serve our clients, we can serve our employees, we can serve our community. They're all concepts of purpose. And the point there is, you need employees who are happy. They come to work, they feel a sense of belonging. So there's so much there which resonates, and that's a real heartfelt piece for business owners. When if we think about the typical accounting piece, it's the logical base, but we're trying to get into that heartfelt of who's who in the business. And the final bit you said there is, when you first came into this in 1991, and I'd love to just go back and fill in that beginning of the story because you used the words before forum and after forum. You didn't start out like this. When you were at college, you were doing something different. You were on a different purpose, and something happened in that journey. You met somebody, and you and I told the story, and that took you on a different direction. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I think that puts some richness to this story in itself.
Well, listen, I'm going to start with just doubling down on what I said earlier, in that as a teenager, I was not socially comfortable at all. And so I was a finance major at the University of Maryland. I thought I was going to go work on Wall Street. That was my plan. And my senior year, my last semester, I took a class titled Entrepreneurship. And the professor was Vern Harnish, who, as many of your listeners would know, started the Scaling Up organization and was the founder of what was called the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. It's now just the Entrepreneurs Organization. Yeah. So Vern just impressed me. He was the most impressive teacher I'd had in my entire schooling. And by the time I got to him, I was a good student finally, because I wasn't always. And we hit it off. And he brought these incredible entrepreneurs to speak with us and shared many stories about, 30 under 30 and the fastest growing entrepreneurs in the country, or in some cases in the world. And it was just mesmerizing. Yeah. And so when I graduated, and after I got my A in the class, I went to thank Vern. I said, Vern, I want to thank you. This class was truly inspirational, and you're the best teacher I've ever had. Wow. And that is when Vern said, do you know anybody who would like to be my associate director? And I said, as a matter of fact, I do. He's right here. And so I started January of 1990. Wow. Literally a couple of days after the beginning of the year. Within 9 months, Vern decided to move on, and I became executive director, which was a holy SHIT moment. Because again, I'm just a year out of college. And it really just changed my life. And I didn't go to college thinking I'm going to run an association for entrepreneurship, nor did I go to college thinking I'm going to be in the peer group business.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's January 1990, and here we are, November 2024, and this is what's formed you effectively. This is what you now do, and we want to talk about international facilitators organization later on as well, because I think that's a big part of where that journey comes together. But obviously, one of the things you did, you went from YEO, and as you said, YEO has now transformed into EO. And I was listening to one of your podcasts recently with Neil Bolter, talking about how YEO has changed to EO, and actually now there's a seniors side of it as well, because all those people have grown up in it over the last 30 years as well. So there's the next level as people still need that support. And I think that's a really interesting point.
I think that's a really important thing that should not be overlooked. Some people who don't know what this concept is might think, well, I make more money than I need. I don't need this concept. Or they might think my business is doing $100 million in dollars. I don't need this concept. But even the Neil Bolter interview. So Neil Bolter was the founder of California Closet Company, and before he got to 30, he had built it to over 100 million in sales. Sold this company to Williams Sonoma. They really created the industry of organizing people's closets. If you go anywhere in any fancy house and you see a closet built out and beautifully done, they were responsible for that. But Neil Bolter still belongs to a forum. Yeah. He still has a forum of peers that he goes to help him with all of life's issues. And so, even Michael Jordan had a coach. You don't stop learning, you don't stop growing. One of the concepts that we talk about frequently is being lifelong learners. Mm-hmm. And to be able to do it with a group of people who sees you for, in some cases, decades, is quite illuminating, because they could see your evolution. They could see how you've changed. They could remind you, here's what we saw you talk about or do 5 years ago, and here's what's happening now. So it's a powerful thing to be able to see how people see you and reflect on that as part of your growth trajectory.
And do you know what I love about what you just said there as well? There's often, when we talk about coaching, and you used a couple of coaching stories there, and I think a lot of people, when I started in coaching back in 2008, I'd been first coached in 1997. So I've been around coaching for a while, but at that time, coaching was almost seen as the remedial class. You needed improving. Therefore, you can go get a coach. But I think over the last 15 years I've been doing this, actually, you realize that people are now proud to have a coach, because that's something that supports them. I was listening to an interview recently with Marshall Goldsmith, and Marshall Goldsmith is one of the founding fathers of coaching across the world, as well as many others, but he's done amazing work. And he says, actually, his job there is to support individuals, and people should be proud. And whereas in the past, people didn't talk about who their coach was or who they were, now they're proud to say, hey, my coach is Bern Harnish. This is what I get from it, because they're proud of that and what it's doing for them. And I think there's something where you talk about Neil there about, he still sees that forum, that ability to be part of that lifelong learning community is so powerful for him. And to me, there's something else in that, where you use the word people see you. And I think there's something there where people see you for who you are, not just what you are, not just the founder of the California Closet Company, not just the founder of XY Business, but you're an individual, that human being behind it. And I think that's the powerful piece that I really pick up from what you've just said there. It's the human piece, the human aspect.
I would also, thank you. And I would also add how empowering it is and has been for me to realize that these people love me for who I am, not for any pretense, not because they want to do business with me, not because they have a vested interest in what I do.
Mm-hmm. And that's really powerful, isn't it? Because I think often in business, we go into groups, we go into networking organizations, and people there are trying to sell to you at some level. But actually what you said, they love you for who you are.
And actually, we don't sell to one another. In fact, we don't do business with one another because we want it to be pure. We want nothing to encumber our ability to be completely open and honest with each other.
That's amazing. What a great organization in that sense, because obviously that's something that's grown up around you. And I think, You mentioned about how EO has now expanded with roughly over 34,000 members, I believe, last count when I heard the last figure. So it's an enormous organization. But there's lots of people coming together for that support wherever they are in the world. And I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
So take us forward in that case, that journey for you. January 2019, January 1990, where you're starting with Vern. A number of months later, Vern took off to do other things, but he trusted you. He had faith in you to build something. And you're associate director of the business. You're running this organization. What's the story like for you? That young Mo, in that sense there, 30 plus years ago. What was it like doing that, being trusted with that present?
Well, look, the very first thing that I realized in that moment is my clients are all entrepreneurs of companies that are at least 1 million in sales and on average 10 million in sales. And at the time when I took over as executive director, I don't think we had even done 100 or 200,000 in sales at that point. The organization was so young and fledgling. And so my belief, and I still believe it to this day, is every one of our members was a mentor to me. Wow. And in fact, I drew an organizational chart for my staff, and it was upside down. I was on the bottom as the servant leader.
Yeah.
And my job was to serve them, and their job was to serve our members. And the members were at the top of the organization. And, I think you could call it humility. You could call it just awareness that these people knew way more how to run a business than we did as a staff at such a young age, at such a young time in our careers. And I think that was really maybe forced humility, if I would say so. Not that I felt forced, but it gave me a lot of role models and a lot of mentors and a lot of amazing people from whom to learn as we were growing.
And I'm guessing here, you're probably still in touch with a number of those people from those early days who are still part of EO forums worldwide.
100%.
Yeah. Wow. So let's fast forward in that case. So the young Mo taking over this organization, working alongside Vern, who created it, and Vern has gone on to many other great things since then, and we know that. And you and I were together in Boston, and Vern was there when Vern introduced you at the time. That's an accolade in terms of what he said about you and how that relationship's developed. Take us through the next few years, because obviously you moved forward from that point. 1991, I think. You then talked about YPO, YEO. Where did you go next? Because obviously this has been your life over this period of time to get us to today where we are with International Facilitators Organization as well.
Yeah. So by 1997, I had firmly decided my favorite part of my job was these peer groups.
Yeah.
And I started Forum Resources Network. And basically the concept was we are going to be the outsourced provider of peer group programs to other organizations.
Wow.
And that business still goes on, and we've done peer groups for organizations like Google, and we've started another company that did peer groups for business school alumni, and through that business, we've done peer groups for Harvard Business School alumni. And so what we've realized on that journey is when we started, peer groups were just for entrepreneurs and CEOs. And now what we're seeing is they're not just for entrepreneurs and CEOs. Any group of peers can benefit if they follow this methodology, which has truly magical outcomes.
Wow. So what is it? What is that thing that makes a great forum? You've learned this over the years.
Yeah.
Because we've all been part of, many of us have been part of networking organizations, we've been part of mastermind groups, some have worked, some haven't worked. What's the magic sparkle dust that says this is what makes a good forum become a great forum, or a great group become a great group, or a better group?
Yeah. Look, the magic sparkle dust is having the safe environment that enables people to be courageous in their vulnerability. And following the structure.
Yeah.
As you could imagine, in any group, some people like to talk a lot, some people don't. And one of the fundamental beliefs is that everybody in the group is equal.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't care how big your business is. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how long you've been at the company. Everybody's equal. If you're at this table, if you're in this room, you're equal. And that means your voice is equally as important.
Mm.
And we need to make space for you. So there is a structure for the meeting. We start with, generally speaking, to simplify it, with updates, what's happening in each person's life
Yeah.
that is of significance, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And then from there, we determine who will be benefiting from the group's wisdom that day. It could be one or two people, and it could be planned in advance. But there's also a process for helping a member address an issue whereby the member takes a few minutes to explain, the group asks questions, and then, and this is the very important magic part, they don't give advice, they share experience. So when you share your challenge with a customer or an employee, we are not going to say, Phil, here's what you need to do. What you're going to hear instead is, Phil, here's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's what worked.
Yeah.
Somebody else will say, here's what I did. And here's what didn't work, with the belief that none of us know what's right for you. But
Mm.
that after you've heard all of us share our experience, you will have much, much better clarity
Yeah.
into your own situation so you could do what's best for you.
I love that. And there's something really powerful about that, isn't there? About sharing experience of what I've done in your situation. This is what I did, as opposed to giving that advice. And I think that's a really interesting step, because obviously that's a step away from coaching, because actually you're putting your mentor's hat on effectively, but giving your own experience.
Yeah. And the
Really.
thing that's really interesting about this notion of not giving advice, some people really embrace it
Yeah.
and do a great job of it. And what comes with it is you hear people's stories.
Yeah.
And so, Phil, you just presented a challenge you have with a client, and you might be feeling alone. You might be feeling discouraged. You might be feeling concerned about your business as a whole.
Mm.
But I promise you, when you hear from 8 of your peers, their experience when they had this situation,
Yeah.
you will feel empowered and you will feel prepared, because somebody's going to tell you, oh, that was an opportunity. I had a call with the client, and they shared with me what wasn't working. And I was able to upsell them something that was even better.
Wow. Wow.
And somebody else might say, you know what, that client was 50% of my business and I lost sleep. And I've learned that no way am I going to let one client be 50% of my business. We're not going to be lazy. We're going to go find more clients.
Do you know, that's really powerful, isn't it? Because that's that gold dust. I use the word magic dust, but that's gold dust in the sense of, what you can do. And this is the learnings I've got. And if you've got people at different levels who can give that information, what wonderful knowledge.
Yeah.
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 So in terms of facilitating it, because obviously I want to come on to that word facilitation. Tell me about the forum in terms of facilitation process. Is it self-facilitated, or is it a facilitator brought in to facilitate the conversation?
We have different clients with different needs.
Okay.
So Google, with its deep pockets, wanted a professional facilitator at every meeting.
Okay.
Young Presidents Organization, where certainly they have deep pockets, maybe not the same as Google's. One of the members acts as a volunteer moderator
Yeah.
who facilitates that group for a year, and
Mm.
then another person takes on that role. And they both have their benefits. If you have a professional facilitator, you're not at the whimsy of any particular member who may or may not know what they're doing.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, you are using volunteer facilitators, it's an opportunity for them to practice their leadership skills and learn how to run a meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they're open and vulnerable with the group, it's even an opportunity to say, please tell me what you see in my leadership style that I don't see, so
Yeah.
that I could be better in other arenas.
That's interesting. So actually, there's a great learning opportunity for the facilitator stepping up as well as being part of the group. They can learn in their own way of doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, great one.
Yeah.
And I love that. There's lots of things. As a coach since 2008, I've learned a lot of things. As a consultant prior to that, I learned a lot. But I think it's that coaching piece when you're able to listen, when you're able to sit down and just reformulate. But I love what you're talking there about, the speaking from experience. And it comes back to what you said earlier. You said one of the points of what you is about facilitating meaningful conversations for the sake of building real relationships. And that facilitation comes into that. So I want to just come forward again a little bit further. So where you are now in that case, we talked here about building what you created back then, and then you've taken that forward again. So tell me about the next bit of the journey from 97 onwards in terms of what's created you now, because at the end of the day, you're where you are today with facilitation still in the title of what you do.
Yeah. So our newest venture is International Facilitators Organization. And we're just a year old. And that organization was founded because primarily I believe and have for the last 30 years that every human being deserves to be in a forum peer group. And that if we could manage to make that so, the world would really be a better place.
Yeah.
The support that I've received from my group, and it's not just me. I mean, you'll talk to members of the Young Presidents Organization, and they'll tell you this is the number one member benefit. And that organization has 95% retention. So these groups are just so powerful that I, to my core, believe every human being is better off to have a support group of their peers than alone.
Wow.
If you're alone, you're just stuck with the thoughts in your own head. And I don't know who you might be that you can be so smart you're better off by yourself than with a group of 8 people.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're going to be smarter
Yeah.
having people and have the support. And so the New Business International Facilitators Organization, we want 1 billion people in peer groups by 2053. It's a
Wow.
big, hairy, audacious goal,
Yeah.
a BHAG in Jim Collins' parlance. And our niche, our angle is to train and certify the facilitators that do that work. So we really were just looking for 33,000 facilitators, 33,333 to be exact. And that over the course of 30 years gets to 1 billion people based on the number of people that I've had the fortune to work with in the last 3 decades doing this work.
Wow, what a big, hairy, audacious goal, as you say, and it's interesting. I love that in terms of building something out, and as you said, the key for what you is about connecting people, and that you believe, which is a great point to start, that everybody should have the opportunity to be in a forum, and that's part of what your mission is in some ways. So tell me about the purpose behind that, because obviously purpose becomes a big point. So yes, everyone should have a purpose above and beyond making money, in my view. That's how I talk about. What's the purpose behind that? Because once you've got 1 billion people in forum, having that facilitated conversation, based on your experience of what you know from YPO and YEO and building a facilitation of them, what's the purpose behind what you're doing at a root level?
So I'll tell you a story. And this story is really about human connection. And in this divided world that we are experiencing, whether it's the US political situation or the wars in the Middle East, what's really clear to me is people are brought up with a belief. And that belief can be good, it can be bad, but when that belief says we are better than them,
Yeah.
that's the beginning of
Yeah.
problems. Or when that belief is, these people have hurt us for generations, then we're just perpetuating this notion and we're generalizing and we are putting everybody in that group in the same bucket.
Yeah.
So the story, just to make the point, is, I moved to the US from Egypt when I was 11 years old. And Egypt at the time was mostly Muslim, but I think maybe 10% might have been Coptic, which is the Egyptian version of Catholicism.
Okay.
Um, it's the best I could define it. And it wasn't very diverse, so to speak. Coming to the US opened my eyes in many ways to meet people from all over the world, as well as from all sorts of different religions.
Mm.
And then joining my own forum also enabled me to open my eyes even more. And so one of our members, and just by way of background, our group has gotten so close. We have been to every funeral and bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah and wedding. And I mean, we've become that close. So in this instance, one of our members lost his mother. And his mother, the funeral was in New York. We live in DC, but a few of us flew up to go to the funeral. And I saw my forum mate outside of the synagogue. So he's obviously Jewish. I saw him. He came over, and I'm from Egypt, right? He comes over, he hugs me. And as we are hugging one another, he starts to cry. And I start to cry with him. And then he says, after 3 days, his mother had died 3 days previously. And then he says, this is the first time I felt comfortable or safe to cry. So here's my forum brother who has been with his own family for 3 days and has not felt safe to cry until he was in my arms. And so what I want to say is these groups have enabled us to see each other as human beings, as people, not as labels generalized by a category that we could be bucketed into.
Yeah.
And by seeing each other as people, I assure you, he does not see me as all Egyptians. I don't see him as all Jews. We start to contextualize that there are many, many different views within any group.
Yeah.
And that opens curiosity. It creates an open-mindedness. And hopefully for other people will build bridges as it did with me and my forum mate.
Yeah. Yeah. What an amazing story, because there's a real emotion in what you're saying there. And it has so much more meaning with what's going on in the world at the moment. Whereas what I heard there is people see each other for who they are, the human being behind it, not Jew, Muslim, Republican, Democrat, Conservative, Labour, whatever the label is. You're actually giving people a human touch. And I think there's really something there. And I think, to me, bring this out of business. Actually, everybody needs this, because we talk about it from a business perspective. But realistically, this is just something everybody needs, that ability to connect and share. And although we talk about YPO or EO or scaling up coaching, actually what we need is that ability to connect with individuals at a one-on-one level and use that word, we see each other properly. And we don't do that. And I think there's something really powerful in what you're saying there that would bring that alive, and just thinking about the change that the world would see when you get to 2053 and you've got 1 billion people in forums. What an amazing change you might see in the world.
I could only hope. We could only hope, Phil.
Yeah. Great. I mean, I think that's amazing, because I think at the end of the day, there's a better way of getting along every day if just having those conversations.
Yeah,
I love that
it's much harder to judge someone once you understand their story, once you hear their story.
Yeah.
It's far, but if we don't hear the story, if we don't get to know each other, it's easy to just say, oh, he's another fill in the blank.
Yeah, exactly. And we label it straight away. And I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? And it's interesting from a business perspective, because I'm thinking, when I met you in Boston, you led an amazing session for us as scaling up coaches. You had many people in tears thinking about some of the questions you asked. You had a real connection. And I think there's something there that you bring to it. And I wonder from a point of view of finding those 33,333 other facilitators, what's that thing that you look for? Because they can't all be like you, but they can follow a process. So what do you look for in a facilitator that brings that to life?
There are three things that very much are the criteria that we look for when we bring on facilitators as members or when we book them for clients. So first, they have to be able to drive a vulnerable conversation. There are some people out there that are scared of vulnerability, that run away from it. They're not our facilitators.
Yeah.
The second thing is they have to be self-aware. If you're a speaker, you could show up, stand on stage and talk for 50 minutes, and maybe that's okay. But if you're facilitating a meeting to drive connection and change, people need to talk. And as a facilitator, you better not be talking the entire time.
Yeah.
You better be self-aware of how much you're talking and group aware of, is everybody getting to participate?
Yeah. Yeah.
And are we hearing all the voices?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the third thing is you have to believe in our core foundational values of not giving advice and being non-judgmental. So having trained facilitators for decades for different organizations, I often have come across members of these groups who say, we don't insist on speaking from experience. If somebody wants advice, we allow it. And so, look, we don't force anybody to do anything because at the end of the day, we just share our experience that by speaking from experience, you're going to have a more meaningful, powerful experience. And we have stories about that. But our facilitators cannot go around saying it's okay to give advice. They have to believe in their core that advice is not good for safety and vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, that safety and vulnerability piece, because I think, as you said, you're looking to drive that connection. You've got to build that self-awareness to start with. And then at the end of the day, building vulnerability in others has to start with yourself as well. And I think that's one of the core pieces here, that to really create that connection, there's got to be some process that people have been through mentally for themselves to enable them to do it. Because if you were to go back to talk to that young Mo back in 1990, as you said, that wasn't the way you were to start with. You were on a journey to go onto Wall Street, to do something completely different. And there were a few things hidden in the cupboard that you hadn't let out at that time. And they probably didn't come out for many years after that. What does it take to somebody to really open up, to be vulnerable? Because we hear this a lot. And I love the fact that you said there's three things for facilitators: to be able to drive vulnerable conversations, to be self-aware, and to believe in that, not being giving advice and being non-judgmental. But what does it take for an individual to really, truly trust the process, to open up?
First of all, each person is different, and some people may never open up. I'm not going to tell you that every person we encounter opens up fully. That is certainly not the case. But I would say this. I would say large majority of people are very surprised by how much people do open up when given the opportunity.
Yeah.
And very quickly. But what does it take in addition to the safe environment that we've talked about a couple of times? There's a concept in positive psychology called emotional contagion. And so when the first person speaks, if that person is vulnerable and emotional, then that sets the stage. And one of the things we train our facilitators to do is to be the first. So you're going to ask hard questions that may bring people to tears, but you better answer that question first to set the tone.
And that's a powerful thing, isn't it? And that emotional contagion, because you're right, if you can create a room there and people sense it and feel it. So at the end of the day, like with coaching, not everybody wants to be coached. I say the inverted coach, that nobody wants to be coached at the start, but some people get into it and realize actually it's a real benefit to them in life. It's not just about business. I often think that people come to a coach because they want something above and beyond what they've got. They want to really reach out, and they're looking for support. And a bit like the conversation we mentioned earlier, that in the past people saw a coach as a remedial action. To me, it's about giving people the ability to really push themselves and ask themselves questions in normally a one-on-one situation or maybe a one-on group situation. But what I'm hearing from you there is actually building that forum where you've got individual members, in this case, business owners coming together on a regular basis, learning from each other, connecting with each other. There's something there about building that trust in the first place. And if it does come back to the initial facilitation process, but the individuals have to sense it. They've got to feel confident in it.
Well, they have to also self-select. So, when we launched this program with Google as an example, it was an invitation to join. Nobody is ever forced to join a peer group because a non-willing participant can do more damage to the group than not having that participant.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and that's really interesting, isn't it? It's the same as people being forced into coaching groups because they've been told to go to it. It'll be good for them.
Yeah.
If they don't want to do it, they're still the same. They become the disruptive element in the room. And therefore, we need to help them manage themselves out of that, or help them convince themselves that they need to be there for some other reason.
Yeah.
So there's something about that. So in terms of International Facilitators Organization, we've got three things we're looking for. We're looking at that vulnerable conversations, that self-awareness. We're looking for that belief and that non-giving advice belief. What does the training course look like to do that? Because some people will have that already. Some people think, I'm never going to be there. So if you had somebody who steps up and says, I want to become a facilitator, what does the training look like to create that awareness in the first place?
I mean, we start with an interview and we learn from each person as to why they want to do this work, what their motivation is. And we get a sense with their comfort level of how open they are just on that interview, and what their background is. If it's not for them, obviously no harm, no foul. But, sometimes we find out it's not for you after the training has begun. There was a situation at one of our certification courses where at the end of day one, this person said, hey, this isn't quite what I thought I was going to get.
Okay.
And me being the people pleaser that I am, I said, well, what are you hoping to get? Maybe we can make sure we include it tomorrow. And that night, two of the participants approached me and said, hey, we are not here for what this person wants to get. We're here for what you promised, which is what we're getting. And so that next morning, I said to this person, look, I'm not changing the program. You're welcome to leave and have your money back. But our program and our certification is about the core of creating a safe environment to have vulnerable conversations so people can have real relationships that are impactful, that are going to make a difference in their lives.
Wow.
If that's not what you want, it's okay. Take your money back. You could go.
Yeah. Powerful, really powerful. So this is a wonderful conversation. And we talked a lot around the surface level of what facilitating a vulnerable conversation is about. Do you mind if I ask you one question?
Please.
And you're on it. We can cut this out if need be, but here we go. From your perspective, you've opened up to a lot of things, and courage and vulnerability go hand in hand. So I wonder, from your perspective, where have you needed to be really, truly courageous? And what was it like when you first opened up?
I have so many places to answer that question, so many ways I could answer that question. But look, the first time I went to forum training in 1991, I don't remember what the question was that prompted me to answer this. But when I was a kid, there were a couple of instances where I was molested. And it was not a good thing. It wasn't something that I ever shared until that day. in Toronto in 1991. But you know what? What a gift. What a
Mm.
gift. What a
Wow.
gift to be able to share that. What a gift
Mm.
to be able to get that off my chest.
Wow.
What a gift to be able to give people the hope
Yeah.
that they could share not the same things, but whatever things
Yeah. Yeah.
they're going through by paving the path for them.
Yeah. And I love that word, paving the path, because as you said before, the facilitator has to pave that path. So what you're looking for is that ability to drive vulnerable conversations by being self-aware. So for you back in 1991, that's a tough conversation to have, but you obviously felt enough trust and love in the room to be able to share something which was deep within you
Yeah.
and let that out.
Yeah. And I mean, look, again, until you let it out, maybe I felt shame. I mean, it's been so long.
Mm.
But what I'm realizing as a result of this incredible wisdom from being in these groups,
Mm.
there's no shame in it. It just is a fact of something that happened that, I had no control over. And
Mm.
you know what? That was a different day. It was a different time. It was a different person.
Mm.
And we grow
Wow.
past these things. But here's the thing. There's a concept called the drama triangle. And in the drama triangle, they talk about a victim
Yeah.
as the start of this triangle. And the victim goes to a hero who saves them. And they're usually complaining about the villain who, whatever the villain is, whether it was somebody or whether it was traffic or the weather, whatever got in their way. And in talking about this drama triangle, people say, well, what if you really are a victim? Sometimes I get that question. And I say, look, if you get run over by a bus and you break a leg, of course you're a victim. But are you going to be a victim for the rest of your life?
Mm. Really interesting. I use the drama triangle a lot in my work. And if I can just throw something else in here, because I think people saying that victim mentality and the label I put around that is the word fear.
Mm,
And the opposite of fear has been lots of debate, but I used to use the word love. And if I take the opposite of being fear, and that's about things are done to me, I got run over by the bus, I couldn't do anything about it. But if you then flip to the other side and say, I create the whole of my reality, I
yeah,
take responsibility and responsibility for what happened to me. We can transform the meaning of being run over by the bus. Now that's a strange concept to think about, but it's transferring that from being in that victim, rescuer, persecutor mode of going on that cycle to flipping to the other side and just sitting in that view of, I create this. And
yeah,
it's all about the way I perceive things.
that's right. I could change my perception of what happened.
Yeah.
I could change my reaction to what
Yeah.
happened. I can reframe my emotions about what happened. I could look for the opportunities
Yeah.
that I may have as a result of what happened, or I could wallow in victimhood for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I don't know. What sounds better to you, Phil?
Yeah. And I think, do you know what the word to me comes up, which I use regularly, is the word choice.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I've talked to say, I have no choice in the matter. And I put my coaching hat on and ask the questions around it because my belief that I carry with me is we all have a choice.
Yeah.
We may not be choosing to use that choice, but we do have a choice.
And that's a powerful, powerful disposition because not having a choice is a depressing prospect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we can talk in theory there. And I love the fact you've opened up there, Mo, in terms of what you said there, because that's a really powerful emotional thing to put out. And to me, I'm just picturing yourself back in 33, 34 years ago, having that conversation as the young Mo. And that's a lot of unburdening yourself and recognizing what was going on for you at the time. And I wonder, without going into the detail, because it was 34 years ago, but if you then thought about how you move from that victim mentality that could have existed prior to that opposite side of acceptance, I wonder what was going on for you then and what other people can learn from that, because this is the journey that Forum's brought for you, which is why you still do it.
You know something, my grandfather, my late grandfather, who I lost when I was almost 8 years old. I don't remember much, but I remember him saying something about courage and bravery. And he would say, if you're in a jungle and you encounter a lion, reach in its mouth and rip its guts out. And to me, that's been a metaphor for life, because at the end of the day, being vulnerable requires courage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
in addition to coping and accepting and dealing and reframing, it took courage to share.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes courage to share it on a podcast. I don't know who's even going to be listening.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't know you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful. And if I just connect the dots here in terms of that, the power of the forum, the power of the network, where you've got that creation, and linking back to the point you mentioned before about standing outside the synagogue and one of your members hugging you and crying for the first time. A lot of people might listen to that and say, what's that all about? But to me, that's the real power of connecting back. And, we're in business, but actually we're in business of that human relationship business. And I come back to what you said to me last time, that I asked you the question of, what would it be like when you had your 1 billion people? And you said the world would be more peaceful. And that comes from that human connection where people really have the courage to confront what's going on for them. And as you said, coping, accepting, dealing with it, reframing it, but actually it takes courage.
Look, Phil, after the October 7th attack on Israel, the first 2 calls I got were from Israel, from members of the Entrepreneurs Organization. And then the next 2 calls I got were from the Young Presidents Organization. And basically what these calls were about was the same theme. And it was this: we have members who are at odds because they have a different view on the events that just took place. And these members want other members removed, expelled, and it's getting really, really nasty. So we created a series of what we called hard conversations, where we would have a panel of speakers, 2 representing each side, so 4 total, and then a room of about 50 people. And on the panel, what we would do is each panelist would share their story, how they grew up, what emotions they had at the time, what beliefs they were told, and then how they feel now, what emotions they're feeling in the present moment about what's going on. Some rules were no generalizations. And we're not going to refer to what's in the news, because God knows what news you're watching, but who knows what to believe? They're all different stories. And what was incredibly profound and illuminating and eye-opening was to hear that a Jewish woman from Annapolis, Maryland, has had the same experience of being othered as a Pakistani Muslim guy who's from Virginia, in terms of how they were treated at some point, because of their beliefs, because of their backgrounds, because of their religious affiliation. And when those 2 people heard each other's emotions about this very same story that they experienced, very quickly it became obvious we're fighting the same fight.
Yeah. I think that's
if we got to know each other and hear each other's stories, we're much more empathetic and supportive than whatever we're led to believe by just watching the news.
There's so much power in that, isn't there? And I think those 2 rules, I think, that you set at the beginning of those conversations are the powerful piece for me as well. No generalizations, no discussing what's in the news because what you're watching is different to what I watch. We pick up different nuances on it, but it's the real story there. And the othered piece, Tara Brach talks a lot about this in her work, about the othering is what causes lots of the problems. And when you notice that we're being othered by people and we are experiencing the same thing, you can start connecting to people at a different level and really understanding what it's like.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I wonder, let's just come towards a wrapping up now in that case of where we are with this podcast, because there's been an amazing story there. And we've been on a head and a heart journey, a head in terms of the logic. We've talked about the YPO, we've talked about the YAO, we've talked about the Mo growing through that journey and taking over the associate director role with Vern and stepping out of his Wall Street journey to do something completely different and taking a different path. And then we've had that emotional journey of the stories you've told there. And I'm grateful for you sharing what you've shared in terms of the process, the courage. What's next in terms of building this? Because to find 33,333 facilitators in the next 21 years, that's a big ask. Well, 31 years, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. 2053, we're 29 years. So it was a 30-year goal when we started this organization a year ago. Look, YPO has 38,000 members over the course of 60, 70 years. EO has 18,000 members over the course of, since 1987. So we'll call that 35 years. So I don't think it's unreasonable to reach our goal by 2053, just based on those two data points. And in fact, I think with modern technology and, we did not have social media when EO was started in 1987. I think it could even happen more quickly. But, listen, when organizations have this concept as part of their DNA, it is a much better place to work. I mean, this should be an employee benefit. Imagine this. Today, we know that there's a severe shortage of mental health resources. So imagine, an organization saying, we'll give you an executive coach, we'll give you a shrink if that's what you need.
Yeah.
Or you could join a peer group. Because guess what? It's therapeutic.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's a learning environment. One of our facilitators just yesterday was saying, maybe you need a management training program, but perhaps that management training program after 5 hours will be forgotten completely in 5 months. What you need is a peer group learning platform where you continue to learn together and continue to help each other and learn what you need to learn when you need to learn it, rather than us giving you a whole bunch of content that may or may not be relevant. And it goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, love that. What a great opportunity. I think that's amazing. And interesting, what you've just opened my mind up there is to the other ways that this type of organization can really benefit individuals. And the peer group aspect is such a powerful approach when you just mentioned from a mental health point of view. Yes, we could provide you a counselor or a shrink or a psychotherapist to help you. Or you can join a peer group where people also talk and work together and have your back. And I think that's a big part of this. So what a journey potential ahead of you in that case. I love that. Thank you. So we talked about looking forward. It's not unfeasible to see this moving a lot quicker than you planned because of technology. There's lots of things there. If you were to go back and give the young Mo some advice back in 1990, 91, when you took these things over, what's the piece of advice you would give that if you could now reach back and change something, what would happen? And what would that advice be?
It's a hard question, Phil. It's a hard question because sometimes I get a question of, what do you regret? And I don't regret much, in the sense that I am today because of what happened yesterday. Right? And so when I reflect on your question, I don't know. I honestly don't know what I would have done differently. One thing that comes to mind, it's just a very practical thing, but maybe a dumb mistake on my part. When I resigned in 1997, I think my ego was too much in the way for me to have asked this organization that I loved so dearly to give me a vendor contract to continue to provide some of the services, which they ended up hiring me to do anyway 18 months later. But in that first 18 months in my own business,
Mm.
I certainly struggled with cash flow and credit card debt, just trying to get things up and running. And
Yeah.
I think that mistake was just not getting that contract before I left.
Yeah. And that was an ego-based thing by the sound of it as well, partly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought, listen, I loved EO. It changed my life. I would do nothing differently.
Yeah.
But for when I left, perhaps I was a little sour. It was overcompensation. Um, but it wasn't about the compensation, Phil. It was about, I felt I was not treated fairly.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't that I actually cared about the hard dollars. It was like, well, wait a minute. What is this signaling
Yeah.
if we have this gap in understanding of what my value is?
Yeah.
Um, and so because of that, my ego was a little bruised. And because of that, I thought, you know what? I will make money elsewhere. I don't need to even think about this group.
Yeah.
Um, and and in the long run, that is a true statement.
Mm. Yeah, of course.
But
Yeah.
in the short run, it could have made my life much easier.
Yeah. Love that. And I love what you just said, the phrase you said before that. I am today because of what happened yesterday. And I think there's a lot of truth in that in terms of, just going back over time, that life that has you've lived has thing that's created you today. You wouldn't be who you are today or where you are today if you hadn't had yesterday to get you here. And that's a really powerful thought.
Look, as a teenager, I felt othered. I felt lonely at times. I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like I didn't belong.
Mm,
And that was painful. And that probably was the kernel and the seed that put me on this trajectory.
mm, wonderful. And I think the thing there I'm learning as well is that the forum is the thing that helps you voice that and feel supported and just be able to talk about it, which actually, although it's done within the forum, enables you to build that confidence. And we went back to the Cartman drama triangle just now, but actually it helps you move out of victim mode and step away from that. And I think that's a really powerful piece.
Yeah.
So Mo, thank you. Where would people come find you? I know where to find you, but where would other people come find you?
Yeah. So mofatelbab.com
Okay.
is one of our websites. That's my keynote speaking website.
Yeah.
Internationalfacilitatorsorganization.com
Yeah.
is for this brand new business that's a year old. Then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Mo Fathelbab.
Yeah.
And I'll spell it out for those of you that are
Yeah. Great.
not watching. It's Mo, M-O, and Fathelbab is F as in Frank, Athelbab.
Yeah, really brilliant. And what we do, we always write show notes up for this. People know, so the show notes will be connected to this show, so people can connect on there and be able to click on the links and go straight through to it. But Mo, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot about you and a lot about myself, as always, from talking to you. And I come back to the point when we met in Boston. You moved many of us to tears just from some of the conversation in a good way. And it's that connection I think you bring. And I really come back to what you said there, that at the beginning, you said that facilitating meaningful communications for the sake of building real relationships. I think it's that real relationship that I'm hearing from you now. Is that you're open, you're honest, and your connection is coming across just through the Zoom conversation now, and I love that. And I look forward to having lots more conversations with you in the future about where you're going, what you're doing, and the forum world as well. So thank you, Mo. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Phil. Pleasure was mine. Thank you so much.